over the past couple of years on this channel, you have seen me being a fairly mediocre sim racer on the F1 games. Now, we've set top 10 lap times, crashed more times than I care to mention, and even won races in the most prestigious of competitions. However, there is a small but extremely vocal portion of the sim racing community that will dismiss this as nothing more than kids playing at arcade nonsense. In their view, if you want to be a real sim racer, you need to play a real simulator. And they will certainly tell you just that. A lot. That's where iRacing comes in. The current king of the hardcore sim racing market, regarded in most circles as the current top of the line when it comes to competitive multiplayer racing. Boasting cars of all classes and disciplines, from tiny Mazda MX-5s, the junior single-seaters, an officially licensed Mercedes F1 car, and the top endurance racing machines in the world. And that got me thinking. Endurance racing is something I've quietly been watching and enjoying for a long time. Cars going flat out for up to 24 hours, and often races still coming down to the final lap. It is just about as far from Formula 1 as you can get. So I have set myself a challenge. This year, we are going to see if it's possible to go from an F1 game arcade noob to competing against the fastest sim racers in the world over the course of a full 24-hour race around the most famous endurance track in the world. This is the road to Le Mans. So the beast that we'll be starting our iRacing journey in is a little Mazda MX-5 Cup car. Yeah, not the most aggressive of things, but you know, it's a good place to start. About 180 hip brake horsepower, 850 kilograms I should say, and some nice little Fanatec stickering on there. Yeah, this is the ideal place to start here in Rookie. So we're going to get out onto the circuit and try and get to grips with this car and this game and its handling model for the very first time. And I have to say, did take a little bit of getting used to. It is much more in depth than things like the Formula 1 game, which we're used to, and as it turns out, very, very easy to crash, as I found out quite a few times in practice, not just once. And you know, here's another one, just go straight off. The gravel, very, very slippery, unlike the F1 game. See, straight into another big crash into a wall, and it's also very easy to lose a rear end if you so much as breathe on a bit of grass or gravel. You can see, taking you straight off the circuit there as we go completely wide, and then the same corner, once again, coming into there and just completely binning it. So, you know, it did take a little bit of getting used to, but after, you know, an hour or so, we did manage to get to grips with the car, and this is actually the fastest lap we managed to do all week around Oran Park, which I know some of my Australian subscribers will be very interested to see. No longer open, I believe, in real life, but it was the site of some V8 supercar racing back in the day. So, iRacing then, how is this going to work, and what is so interesting to me about this game? Well, for me, it's the way you progress through the game. It's not actually, like most games, by being fast, which sounds a bit strange, but when you think about what iRacing do, it actually makes an awful lot of sense. The way you progress in this game, the way you get into the better classes, the better cars, is not by being quick, but by driving safely. Yes, if you think about it, it does make a lot of sense. Like, why are we rewarding people for winning races when they're winning it by bumping people off the circuit? iRacing takes a complete opposite approach. You can, you know, never win a race in your life and poodle around at the back, but as long as you drive safely, you are, you know, accepted and welcomed into these higher classes, which is something I'm really excited to see how that changes the racing. You'll see in this video. Definitely does change the way that you go about racing around this circuit. But as you can see, coming to the end of our first lap here, well, not our first lap, but you know, our first actual good lap of Oran Park. What's it going to be as we cross the start finish line in the bottom right hand corner there? It's actually a 16.4, which incredibly was enough for 5th fastest in the session. Not entirely sure how we managed to do that, and you know, to be within 0.4 of a second of the absolute quickest guys, when at this point I'd probably been driving on the game for about 3 hours. Yeah, the transition over seems to be going pretty well. However, it's time to sign up for our first race. We jumped on, registered up, and got into a session. And yeah, let's see how it went. And I have to say, this is practice before qualifying, before the race. Little bit crazy. You can see a car just completely stopped on the circuit there. We go off the circuit and have a little bit of a bump. So that wasn't, you know, filling me with confidence. However, what did fill me with confidence was qualifying. We got P2 somehow right behind Ryan Van Eden there, you can see. About 3 tenths behind, but you know I wasn't feeling particularly comfortable. But you can see we were actually quite far ahead of the rest of the grid. However, that confidence would come back to bite me at the start of the race. Time for the first race. Oh, we didn't put it in gear. Oh dear. Yeah, we forgot to put the car in gear, which meant that when the lights went out, we didn't move. So you can see already down to P5, under pressure on the outside, but we're just going to take it easy into turn 1, because like I said, it doesn't matter if we win, but if we have contact with cars, if we go off the circuit, if we lose control, we lose safety rating points. That's not what you want in rookies. You want to get out of it by driving it as cleanly as possible. So, although we're down into P5, you know, it's actually good because we've not got any incident points. You can see through here, the car in front getting a little bit raggedy. But yeah, you can see we're on that number 4. We are quicker than these guys, but we haven't just gone for a dive bomb. This is much more refreshing than the F1 game where you would have just stuck your nose in by now somewhere. You can see up ahead that white car of your Sabre goes completely wide through there. Everyone checked up, and I don't go for a dive bomb. Yeah, like I was saying, this dynamic of not being able to just send the car up the inside and not worry about contact makes the racing so much more interesting, because you're not just sending huge dive bombs, you actually have to work for your overtakes, you have to set them up, you know, corners in advance, get people out of line, as you're going to see as we come down the straight. Because one of the things I had noticed as we go into lap number 5 is that Phil in front was rather weak going through the first couple of corners. Really, you can go flat out until you reach the curb on the inside, but he was braking way earlier just to try and keep the car stable. We weren't, so through here we're going to lift off a little bit. You see he brakes really early, and then we're going to absolutely send one up the inside. The brakes locked a little bit there, which is why we've gone so wide. I didn't quite intend for it to be that big of a dive bomb, but you know, we got the move done cleanly. He's trying to come back around the outside, so we're going to leave him space. We're not going to cut him off. He goes for the big move around the outside, but you're not going to be able to get it done through this hairpin, and we're up into P4 now. And, you know, straight onto the heels of your Sabre. You can see, onto lap number 7, still not sent a dive bomb. We've had to take our time, and this is a perfect example of what you're going to see here about setting up an overtake. We're putting pressure on into the first corner. He goes defensive but outbrakes himself. We set the move up by braking earlier, getting on the throttle nice and early, and surprisingly, you know, I was a bit surprised that Sabre didn't decide to defend the inside, so he's left a gap. We were much better on the brakes in this race, I noticed, so we just send it up the inside, claim the apex, and that is us going to be up into P3, but unfortunately not enough time left to try and catch up to the guys in front. We were quicker than Stewart, but we just weren't able to actually catch him. But a podium in our first race, we can tick that off the list, and as you can see, at the end of the race, we finished 3rd, but the important thing to see there is the safety rating. As you see, it goes up a little bit. We start off with a 2.5 safety rating. We have to get that up to 3.0 if we want to get out of rookies. So if we continue that kind of gain, we should be able to get out of rookies within about 3 races if we keep it clean, which unfortunately didn't quite go to plan in our second race. But what did go to plan was qualifying, and here you're going to see our fastest qualifying lap for the second race. We're going to take you on board for a hot lap around Oran Park in qualifying. So this turn 1, very tricky corner to get right. You hit the brakes just before you hit the curb. The car really wants to oversteer on you there. You can see fighting it all the way through, getting on the throttle nice and early as you get between the 2 apexes, running right out to that curb on the outside. Now using these white bales here as a braking marker, hard on the brakes into first gear, get the car turned in nice and early on the throttle to try and get the car rotated. Next corner is very tricky, you've got to really trail brake into this one because it's undulated. You can see we've gone out to first gear there, which I didn't really want to do because it sort of hindered our exit a little bit. Now up the hill, over the bridge, just as you get to the crest, turn in, up a gear, hug this inside because you don't want to run too wide on the exit because the grass will just send you off to Narnia. Now braking just as we go over the crest, turn the car in, goes very light through there and not touching the grass on the outside because you'll get an off track and invalidate. This corner, really good fun, you can really cut the inside curb. Just got to try and feather the throttle, balance the car as it tries to oversteer, because they are really fun to drive these. This little chicane, completely easy, flat out, just make sure you don't run off the circuit on the exit, and then hard on the brakes, down into second gear for the final corner. Hug the inside line, hard on the power, nice and early, run it right out to the wall, but don't touch it. And that is a lap of Oran Park. Last race we qualified in P2, what's it going to be this time around? Well, it was a 16.926, which was actually quite a decent lap time, and it turned out that that would be our first ever pole position, only by 0.2 of a second, but we got our first podium in the first race, and our first pole position now, so it's actually going pretty well so far for our little iRacing careers. We jump on over from F1, so our qualifying pace has translated, it turns out. How are we going to do in the race, though? Well, once again, we got a terrible start. We didn't rev the car out enough, and once again, we're going to go backwards. Already going to lose about 4 positions coming into the first corner, so you're getting swamped. Now, this red car on the inside, we need to keep an eye on, because this is really where our race goes downhill. He's alongside us going into turn 1. We get a huge snap of oversteer, which I think just spooks him. We've got a car going off there, and as I go to turn in, we got absolutely no scopes coming into that corner. We can't get out the gravel because we've got damage, and that was effectively our race over before it begun. Here's the overhead replay. You can see he just loses the car a little bit there, and you know it's not his fault. He loses control, spears right back across the track, and just wrong place at the wrong time. Completely broke our rear suspension, and it would get bad to worse. When we did finally get back out on the track, another mistake, straight off into the gravel. We still had a bit of damage, even though it should have been repaired. Really wasn't, and that was us out of the race. And unfortunately, you can see getting 10 incident points, which absolutely tanked our safety rating. So we would have to try and recover it with our next race, the third and final one of the week. Hopefully we can drive better, and hopefully at some point our camera decides it actually wants to focus and be a camera, because it's decided it doesn't want to as we go into qualifying. You can see through turn 1, really struggling with the back end. It's stepping out all over the place. It's one of the characteristics of this Mazda MX-5 car. It is extremely slidey. You've really got to learn to balance it as you come through the corners, because that's how you get the speed out of this car. And it does take some getting used to. It's a very different handling model to the ones I'm used to, but very, very fun. Once again, using first gear through that corner. Not sure why I keep doing that, because it's not quicker, I don't think. This corner, a very, very fun one, but we take a little bit too much curb there, and we're going to run it right out to this curb on the outside. But you don't want to touch the gravel. You can see through here, just balancing the car as it tries to slide. Like I said, really is the key to being quick. This one, we get the cut absolutely perfect this time, using all that curb on the inside, on the throttle nice and early, run it out to the curb and bring it over to the left. Straight line the chicane as much as possible to scrub off the minimum amount of speed, and then we come down the hill, braking just at this bit of grass or dirt on the track, turn the car in, keep it to the inside, and once again, run it out to that wall and don't touch it. So what's this lap going to be? It was a 16.9, got us pole position last time. What is it going to be this time around? Well, it's actually not a brilliant lap. It was only a 17.3, but somehow that was still pole position, and I think by the game felt sorry for us after how bad our last race went, that it put us on pole position by quite some way. So I was feeling pretty confident going into this one that, you know, we'd be able to have a good race. We go to the 4 red lights, and it's lights out and away we go, and you can see we actually get a better start this time, but still not as good as Walker alongside us. He's already jumped us going down into T1, but we are still going to be P2. See, looking out the left there to make sure we give him enough space. We learnt our lesson from last time. Don't want any contact into T1, so we brake a little bit early. Cold tyres really are a nightmare as Walker's finding out that where's he going to rejoin? Ooh, right on the apex. Had to steer out of that one. We're side by side now going into turn 2. He's still there, he's leaving us space. Fair play to him, so we're going to have to try and send it up the inside here, because we've got the inside line for the corner. Nice and late on the brakes, claim the apex. Do bounce over that curb a little bit, but he's still there on the outside, so we need to leave him some room coming into this very tricky corner. See, we're going to make a little bit of side-by-side contact, and then get absolutely punted up the rear there by Bradley, and in some way, it actually helps us out a little bit, because it pushed us ahead. So, you know, not thank you for the damage to my little Mazda, the poor thing, but it has helped us get up into the lead of the race, and we can try and use that pace advantage we've got now to try and pull away. But definitely one of the things we have to watch out for, more so than in the F1 game, is tyre temp, especially on the first lap. These things are a nightmare to drive. They're so oversteery, so difficult to control. And yeah, it's definitely something we need to keep an eye on, especially as we go into faster cars and faster classes. Cold tyres really do make a difference on this game. So as we come to the end of the first lap, you can see in the mirror there, Walker fired it in very hot into that final corner. Actually compromises exit onto this main straight, and that's going to cost him a little bit of time. So at the end of the first lap, you can see we have a lead of about a second already, and as the tyres get up to temperature, I think that gap will probably just increase. We did have quite a sizable pace advantage as we look to the qualifying times into turn 1. If you look in the mirror, there is going to be a huge send around the outside there from Martin Gomez, who actually started P9 in this race and was up to P3 by the end of the first lap. So fair play to him, but as you can see in the bottom right, they didn't quite have the same sort of speed we did. We're on the final lap now, and that gap's up to 5.5 seconds, which is slightly mental, because that means on average we're about half a second a lap quicker, maybe a little bit more, which in these cars is actually quite a lot of time. But we're going to look into the bottom right once again here, because it looks like Martin has made a bit of a mistake, and he's lost second place on the last lap. Let's have a little look at what actually happened to him there. So he's come into that tricky corner we were talking about. It's gone a little bit wide, and this is how tricky these cars are. Dips a tyre on the gravel, and that sent him into a half spin. And that, unfortunately, tiny mistake has cost him second. But he's not cost us. We are going to come across the line. So we've got our first podium this episode, our first pole position this episode, and now our very first race victory. This iRacing malarkey seems to be very easy. No, I'm joking. It's a very difficult race. Our safety rating is now up to a 2.71, so, you know, we're almost halfway there to getting out of our rookies. That second race definitely did not help, but I think with a few more clean races, we can definitely get ourselves out of the rookie class, potentially in the next episode. You'll have to tune in this time next week to see if we can. But until then, I've been XSmithyX. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you are going to enjoy this series, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much, and goodbye.